We'll be talking about marine mammals. There are three groups of marine mammals: cetaceans, which include whales, dolphins, and porpoises; carnivora, which include seals, sea lions, walruses, and sea otters; and sirenia, which are the manatees and dugongs. So here we can see a family tree of these. So we have the marine mammal class Mammalia. They're all in Mammalia. And we have the order Cetacea, which includes whales, and we have the mysticete whales, which are the baleen whales, and the odontocete, which are the toothed whales. And then we have the sirenia and carnivora, and we'll be going over each one of these one by one. So characteristics of all marine mammals are that they are warm-blooded and conserve their body heat with either fur or fat. So remember when we talked about marine reptiles, they were not warm-blooded and they didn't conserve their body heat. All marine mammals breathe air. They all have hair or fur. And you may think, what? Really? Whales have hair? And they do have a few little follicles of hair. They bear live young. The females have mammary glands that produce milk for their young, and that is one of the identifying features of mammals. They have streamlined body shape so that they can swim in the ocean, and they have osmotic adaptations to free them from needing to drink fresh water. So we'll take a look first at the order Cetacea, which includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. They have elongated skulls, and they have blowholes on top of their skull so that they don't have to lift their head all the way out of the water to breathe. They can just put the top of their head out. They have a few hairs, and they have a tail fluke. Their tail fin is horizontally shaped for vertical propulsion, and that's the opposite of the way a fish's tail is shaped. So here you can see order Cetacea. Here are some of the whales with their representative sizes. The blue whale is the largest whale, and it's probably the largest animal ever to inhabit the earth. They can be up to 150 tons and up to 30 meters long or 100 feet long. That is huge. This is our most familiar whale in Hawaii, the humpback whale, and we'll be talking more about those. And then we have the gray whale, which is found off of the west coast of the United States, right whales, sperm whales, orcas, and dolphins. So this is just to kind of give you a little idea of some of the size differences of these animals. So cetaceans have some really cool adaptations to help them increase their swimming speed. They have a very streamlined body. They have specialized skin structure, which is 80% water and has a stiff inner layer and narrow canals with spongy material. They also have adaptations for deep diving. They can use oxygen very efficiently. In fact, they're able to absorb 90% of the oxygen inhaled, and that is more than twice as much as we do. We have to breathe pretty often compared to a whale. They are able to store large quantities of oxygen, and they're able to reduce oxygen that's required for non-critical organs. So they have specialized ways of sending oxygen to their brain and their heart and the things that need it the most, and then they can kind of slow down the other organs. So the two main groups of cetaceans are the odontocetes, and these are the toothed whales. They include sperm whales, orcas, dolphins, and porpoises. And then we have the mysticetes, which are baleen whales, and these include humpback whales, gray whales, blue whales, and many more. This is a model of a mesonychid, which is an animal that is an evolutionary step to whales. And whales evolved from land mammals. They were animals that came to land and then went back to the sea. And this is one of the steps along the way. The fossils are depicted with this. If you look at the skeleton of a baleen whale and a toothed whale, the toothed whale is up at the top. You can see some of the differences. One of the main differences is you notice on the toothed whale they have this large area called the melon. And this is where they use for echolocation. So the toothed whales use echolocation to find their prey. And the baleen whales have these big baleen plates that they use to filter the plankton out of the water. If you look here, you can see they have their flipper looks like fingers inside, and they did evolve from animals with legs. And they don't need their legs anymore. They do use their front flippers to swim, but the back leg is just going away, and they still have a remnant of a hind leg, which you can see here with the bone. You can also see the rib cage and their spinal column. One of the characteristics of a toothed whale is that they have one blowhole on top of their head. And a baleen whale has two blowholes on top of their head. Also, toothed whales have teeth, like this dolphin. And baleen whales have rows of baleen. The baleen is made out of keratin, which is much like our fingernails and hair. And there's different types of whales have different types of baleen that can be longer or shorter, but they all use it to sift the plankton out of the water. So the baleen plates hang down as parallel rows. They're made out of keratin, and they use them as a strainer. It allows baleen whales to eat krill and small fish by the ton. Additionally, the baleen whales are broken down into three families. The gray whale, which is a bottom feeder with short baleen. The rorqual whales, which are medium-sized baleens. The balanopterids are the blue whales, finback whales, and other large whales. And the megapterids are the humpback whales. And then the right whales are surface skimmers with long baleen. So here we can see some of the feeding methods. So the southern right whale here, tow net feeding. And the blue whale lunging for plankton. So here's a big plankton area, and they lunge through it with their mouth open. And the gray whale down below here goes around the bottom and digs up the bottom and gets food that way. This is a picture of a baleen plate from a whale. A picture of a jaw with the baleen plate, sorry. So here's some of the mysticetes, the baleen whales. You can see our most familiar whale, the humpback whale, and hopefully you guys can get out and see them during the winter season. We have the bowhead whale, right whale, and the right whales were called right whales because when they were harpooned by the whalers, they would float when they die. And that was the right whale to catch because some of the other whales, if you harpoon them, they sink. And they're so big and heavy, they were hard to pull up onto the boat. And so these are some of the other whales here. The suborder Mysticeti, the baleen whales, include the blue whale, finback whale, humpback whale, gray whale, and right whale. They have those baleen to sieve out prey items. And these whales have very vocal sounds for various purposes. So they sing songs, and then they also have sounds that they make when they're hunting. Here you can see a diagram of how the baleen works. So they have these baleen plates up here, and they can open their mouth and swallow a large amount of water, and you can see here all the krill and everything goes in there. Then they close their mouth and they push their tongue up, which pushes the water out through the baleen plates, and then all the krill gets caught on the baleen plates right here. And then they use their tongue to take it off and swallow it. So this is a whale with its mouth full of water. It has these throat pleats that can expand greatly, and they can swallow tons of water at a time. And then they push it out and strain the food out. It's hard to imagine the size of a blue whale. If you look closely right here, you can see there's a dolphin in front of it. And that dolphin is probably about 6 feet long. So that's a big whale. These are humpback whales feeding, and you can see the little fish that are trying to get away. So they eat krill and other plankton, but they also eat small fish. So they, here we go. Here's krill, and you can see how small it is. So if you can imagine a whale, the humpback whales are about 40 feet long, and if you imagine a whale that big, how much does it have to eat of these tiny little creatures? It's a lot. The humpback whales are known to feed cooperatively, and they do something called bubble netting. And a group of whales will get together, and one of them will go down by the bottom and start blowing bubbles in a circle around a school of fish or krill. And that'll cause the prey to circle into a tighter and tighter ball, and then the whales can come up in the middle of that and eat like this. The humpback whales also make a large migration. They will migrate up to the area around Alaska from Hawaii in the summertime, and they go to Alaska to feed because we don't have those giant schools of krill and small fish here. Those are found in cool waters where there's a lot of nutrients and upwelling. And they travel and spend their summer eating as much as they can, but they come back to Hawaii to mate and to give birth. And their gestation period is about a year, so they'll mate 1 year and then they'll come back the next year and give birth. How do we know this about the humpback whales and where they go? Well, a lot of what we know about whales is by looking at the bottom of their tail. And every humpback whale has a different pattern on the underside of its tail. And it's kind of like our fingerprints. We can look at a whale and tell what it is by its tail. And it can be anywhere from about half black and white to almost all white to almost all black. And scientists who study these have catalogs of sightings, and they take pictures and they'll catalog where they saw a whale, so they know that the whales migrate between here and Alaska, and some of the whales will come from Alaska. Instead of coming to Hawaii, they'll come down to Mexico, and some of the other population will go to off Japan. So here's the migration of the North Pacific humpback whales. So from Hawaii, they'll go up to Alaska, and then some will go to Mexico, some will go to Japan, some will come to Hawaii. And the interesting thing is there's a separate population of humpback whales in the South Pacific, but they don't cross the equator. So in the South Pacific, they will migrate down to the area around Antarctica in the summer, and in the winter they will go to islands such as Tonga and French Polynesia, Samoa, and places like that. This is a humpback whale singing, and they get into an upside down position and sing, and we know now from studying them that it's the males that sing. We used to think that the male was singing to attract a female, but over time we've learned that when they sing, the whales that come to join them are usually other males. So we're still not really sure what that whole thing is about. But what we do know is that all the whales in a population are singing the same song. And they'll sing that same song over and over. And it's the most complex song in nature. And scientists have mapped it out, and they have these sounds that it makes. So they've done these things to map out what it sounds like. And let me see if I can kind of try to do this. They have like whoop 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 whoop. Okay, that is whale karaoke. So that's my version of a humpback whale song. And they will all sing the same song over and over and over. And the song changes a little bit throughout the season. And this is one of the things that's really interesting to me, is that their song changes here in Hawaii, and it also changes in the whales that are off of Japan and Mexico at the same time. So how did they know? Did they agree on it ahead of time? Or can they hear each other all the way across the ocean through those sound channels that where sound travels far in the ocean? Those are still some of the mysteries to be uncovered by future marine biologists such as yourself. Okay, next we're going to talk about cetaceans in the suborder Odontocete, and these are the toothed whales. So these are the dolphins, porpoises, killer whales, and sperm whales, and the like. They use echolocation to determine the distance and direction to objects. And they can also determine the shape, size of the objects, not just the direction to them. A lot of people think that dolphins and porpoises are the same thing, but they're not. So we'll look at the difference. The porpoises are smaller. They have a more stout body shape and a blunt snout, so they don't have that long snout like dolphins. They have triangular, smaller dorsal fin, and they have blunt or flat teeth. If you compare that to a dolphin, dolphins are larger, more streamlined. They have a longer rostrum, and a rostrum is like the mouth, the beak. They have a falcate dorsal fin, which is hooked instead of triangular shape. So this is like a surfboard fin. And they have pointy teeth like killer whales. We talked a little bit before about echolocation in these marine mammals, and they don't do it because they can't see well. They can see fine, but you can't see that far underwater. So they can emit clicks of different pitches, and low frequency clicks can go a greater distance, and high frequency has a closer range. And dolphins can detect schools of fish that are more than 100 meters away. So the sound is generated through their blowhole, and then in the front of their skeleton, the sound is reflected off of that surface, and then the melon, which is that area where I talked about before why the toothed whales have that big forehead, the sound is focused there, and then it exits out off of here. So here you can see they have short, high-frequency sound pulses. And if you're ever out snorkeling or diving in an area where there's dolphins, you can hear those high-pitched sounds that they do. And if you've ever been echolocated by a dolphin, it's a sound you will not forget. So the sound is reflected and returned to the animal and interpreted. And they can tell what it is that they're finding. And one of the problems is that an increase in marine noise pollution may affect their echolocation. So if there's a lot of ship noise and things, and you may have heard about the Navy using sound tests in the ocean and sonar testing and things, and how it has harmed dolphins. Toothed whales are very intelligent animals. They have very large brains relative to their body size. In fact, even larger than ours in relation to our body size. They communicate with each other with very complex language that we can't understand, but we know that they have a complex language and they can understand. They've done lots of experiments with dolphins and found that they can understand a lot. They can't speak because they don't have a voice box to speak, but they can understand commands and what people are saying to them. They have very convoluted brains. And, well, some people might think that dolphins are even smarter than people. And if you think about it, they have a pretty good life. They just get to swim around and play all the time, go catch some fish and eat, and then go play some more. So I think they've figured it out pretty well. This is an orca, or sometimes called killer whale. And these are sometimes spotted in Hawaiian waters, but they mostly spend their time in cooler places. One of our most common dolphins that we have in Hawaii is the Hawaiian spinner dolphin, and these are easy to identify by their color pattern. They have an almost white belly, and then a little bit darker on the side, and then darker on their back. They have a very long snout, and they're one of the smaller dolphins at about 6 feet long. And why are spinner dolphins called spinner dolphins? Because they jump out of the water and spin around. And they usually travel in very large pods. Sometimes you'll see up to 100 at a time. This is a spotted dolphin, and spotted dolphins are very closely related to the spinner dolphins, about the same size and shape, even a similar color pattern, but they have these spots on them. Now, at all their life stages, they don't always have the spots, so the distinguishing feature of this one is the white tip to its rostrum, and they always have that, and it stands out very clearly. And then we have bottlenose dolphins, which are our largest dolphins that we have here in Hawaii. And, well, not the very largest, because there's some other things that are considered dolphins, but they are much larger than the spinner dolphins. And they can get up to about 10 to 12 feet long. And they love to bow ride in front of a boat. So if you go out on a boat very often, you might be visited by dolphins which do this. As you're going through the water, they'll come over and swim in front of you. This is on a boat I used to work on, and they would come and swim in front of us all the time. Now, whales were almost killed off in the past, and the International Whaling Commission was established in 1948 to manage whale hunting. In 1986, 72 International Whaling Commission nations banned whaling. And today there's 3 ways to legally hunt whales. If you are a nation that objects to the IWC ban, some nations have just said, we don't want to take part in that, so we're going to hunt. Also, there's a loophole called scientific whaling, where they say they're studying the whales, although many of those whales end up in the market as meat. And then there's Aboriginal subsistence whaling, which is done by the Alaskan natives and other native people. Next, we'll talk about the order Carnivora, and this includes sea otters, polar bears, walruses, seals, and sea lions. Walruses are very large animals, and they have ivory tusks. They're pretty identifiable by their look, and there's not anybody else that looks like that. They live in cold places where there's ice in the water. They have a very thick layer of blubber to keep them warm. Sea otters mostly live in the kelp forests in coastal and eastern North Pacific. Instead of thick layer of blubber, they have extremely dense fur, and they can make bubbles into their fur to help it insulate better. In the 1800s, they were hunted, but then they started to make a recovery. They're still not back to their pre-hunting populations, and there's a lot of places that still don't have very many sea otters that used to. They can eat many type of marine animals like clams and urchins, and they use tools to open those. So for instance, they will take a rock and beat it on a clam to open it. They swim around a lot, they move a lot, and use up a lot of energy, so they need to eat constantly almost. The next one in this group are polar bears. And you may think, why is a polar bear considered a marine mammal? Well, because they have webbed paws and they spend much of their time in the water. They are considered a marine mammal. The males can get up to 10 feet tall and weigh 1,400 pounds. Females 7 feet and 650 pounds. So these are giant bears. They have a very cute face, but they're one of the scarier animals. And just like the marine crocodiles we talked about before, these bears will actually hunt humans. They have these massive webbed paws so that they can walk on the ice and not fall through, and they also use them for swimming, and they're excellent swimmers. They have thick fur with hollow hairs, and sometimes algae grows inside those hollow hairs so their fur looks green, and they mostly eat seals. The next group are seals, and they're also called earless seals or true seals, and they differ from sea lions and fur seals. So you can see you don't see a seal, you don't see an ear flap there. So the difference between seals and sea lions and fur seals, which are more closely related, are that seals don't have ear flaps that you can see, and sea lions do. Also, seals have smaller front flippers. Seals have 4 claws on their flippers. 4 on the front flippers they have claws. They have a different kind of hip structure. As you can see, the sea lion can walk on all fours, and the seals just drag themselves on their forward flippers. Another difference is that seals have internal testicles and sea lions are external. And if you see how a seal drags itself on the bottom, you might know why it would have that. This is a sea lion. You can see that it has those ear flaps. And in Hawaii, we have the Hawaiian monk seal. And the population estimate in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands is about 1,000 animals. They're the most endangered seal species in the world. They mostly live up in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, in these islands up here. But in recent times, we're seeing more come down into the main Hawaiian Islands, and this may be for several reasons. One is that in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands there are a lot of big fish like sharks and ulua, which they compete with for food. And since humans have fished out a lot of the bigger fish here, they don't have the competition for the small fish that they like to eat. They get up to about 7 to 8 feet long. Their average weight is 450 to 500 pounds, and they can live up to about 30 years. There are many threats to the Hawaiian monk seal, including human disturbance. They come to the beach to rest and to molt, and they have what's called a catastrophic molt, where all of their fur comes off and they grow new fur. And when they're in that stage, they're very vulnerable and they need to rest a lot. Also, they get entangled in fishing nets and other marine debris. There's reduced prey availability because of humans overfishing, shark predation, and natural environmental disturbances such as storms and big waves. The females can get attacked by aggressive males when there's an imbalance in the amount of females and males, and the males are looking to mate. They will mob a female, and sometimes they've actually killed the female. And then there's also disease, and some of the diseases that people are really worried about are the disease that cats have. Um, ugh, they have they're worried about them getting things like distemper and other animal diseases like that cats and dogs have that could be transferred to seals. So it's very important if you have your dog down at the beach to make sure if there's a seal to keep your dog away from the beach, away from the seal. Another problem they have, which is a really sad problem that should never be happening, is that seals are being killed, shot. And there was just another one a few days ago. A seal was shot. I think it was on Kauai. And the fishermen think that these seals are stealing their fish. And I would beg to differ with that because seals were here before humans. They are native Hawaiian animals. They're endemic to Hawaii, found nowhere else in the world. And they evolved here over the time frame that Hawaii was evolving. The reason they mostly live in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands is those were the older islands, and they've been around since even before these younger islands were here. They do not have a choice about what food they eat. They eat fish, and they eat small crustaceans and fish. And in fact, I would say that the fishermen are stealing their fish rather than the seals stealing our fish, because we can always eat other things like chicken. So that's something we really need to educate people about, because there's a rumor going around in the fishing community that these seals were invasive species and they weren't even supposed to be here, which is completely false. And this is a threat of just humans getting too close, and people see a seal and they've never seen one before and they think they want to go over and get right next to it. I've seen people put their kids right next to them. And these seals actually can bite pretty badly. They look cute, but they're not really that friendly. So you don't want to get too close to them because you may be bitten. And the last group we'll talk about is order Sirenia, and these are the manatees and dugongs, and these are all herbivores. They're the only completely herbivorous marine mammal. They eat seagrass mostly, and some seaweed too. Manatees are found in the coastal areas of the tropical Atlantic Ocean, so they can be found in the U.S., in Florida, and in the Caribbean islands. And dugongs are found in the coastal areas of the Indian and Western Pacific Oceans, so in Indonesia and areas around there. And they look kind of similar, but if you look here, you can see easily that their tail looks very different. The dugong has a tail more like a dolphin, and a manatee has a round paddle-shaped tail. These are very slow-moving animals, and there's only about 10,000 thought to exist worldwide. They're protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, but many of them are killed or wounded by boat propellers. Because they are so slow and they just kind of lumber along, fast speedboats will go by and wound them or kill them with their boat propellers. And that's it for Chapter 9, Marine Mammals.